Hi there. Hello, Twitch world. Welcome to Football Outsiders' Twitch channel and our first ever Wednesday show. Hey, it's the Wednesday Ask Us Anything show, AMA, with the M, of course, standing for us. Ask me anything, ask us anything. Anyway, you're here with the Football Outsiders crew. I'm Aaron Schatz, the editor-in-chief of Football Outsiders. I'm here with Mike Tanier, and our special guest this week is Robert Weintraub. You may remember him from such Football Outsiders chapters as the AFC North, which I give him pretty much every year because he's a Cincinnati fan. So the first question of the week, of course, is which one of you is taking the USC job?
It is not me. I am committed to building a franchise here at Football Outsiders. I wish people would stop asking me about it.
Yeah, it's really embarrassing that I have to come out here and say over and over again how I'm committed to this program. I took a job here under Shad Khan. He promised to build us all an infrastructure that we can be proud of and the people can be proud of. So I am not going to Southern California anytime soon. Thank you.
It is absolutely amazing that we are in the middle of September and we already have Urban Meyer being asked if he's planning on leaving the Jacksonville Jaguars. It is really early for that.
I still have to mow my lawn, and we're already in this storyline. I made a joke a couple of weeks ago about how they're burning through plot there in Jacksonville way too fast. They won't be able to get through a season, and this is a good example of that.
Yeah, it's very Game of Thrones-esque, isn't it? It's like expect it to last until episode 10, and we're on episode 2, and already the whole thing is turned upside down. But I mean, I think Vegas has it as the over-under of what? It was 1 year that he would last in Jacksonville. Now it's what, 6 weeks, 8 weeks, or something like that?
I guess some places have him now as the leader and first coach to be fired. Other places have Matt Nagy as the leader and first coach to be fired.
Yeah, if fired is the requirement, then I would go with Nagy. If it leave, exit, resign, then I don't know, because I think Meyer will last until December. He's going to want this. He's going to want to look like he's really trying, and he's going to want this like long range of jobs in front of him before he makes a decision. But still, I'd be leaning toward Meyer too. You know, one thing about that is if you watch the video, and everybody, if you're watching right now, the video is just on your Twitter feed 37 times. The person asking the question is obviously like a Jaguars employee, and it's like spoon feeds softball the question in such a way. So it's all scripted at this way. They're already scripting it to make sure, okay, Urban, so you know how to hit the home run on this question. Here's how it's going to get asked. It's going to be soft, and it's going to put you in a position to look good in this interview.
Yeah. If only they could spoon feed him game plans that might actually work on Sunday. It'd probably help.
You know, I'm not as shocked as everybody else is by Houston winning the game and looking good. Houston has a bunch of professional players. Like, you know, we talked about a lot in the preseason, the idea that Houston was sort of like an expansion team. Like they had a lot of these guys who are just slightly below average. And Jacksonville is a young building team. It was not like the biggest upset in the world. And it certainly doesn't mean Houston is way better than we were all expecting.
No. I mean, I picked Houston to have the number 1 overall pick come next April's draft. However, that is certainly the case. It's just a matter of time, though, until somebody stabs Tyrod Taylor in the lung again, and he has to give up his pick. So it really becomes, you know, for me, at least in Houston, obviously a lot of that sort of preseason joke fest was based around their purity tests in the front office and the various Deshaun Watson debacle. But, you know, yes, they have players. I just don't think they have a ton of depth particularly. So we'll see how long their professionalism lasts. But there's no question they were much more suited to win on opening Sunday than the Jaguars were, no doubt.
The Jaguars came out and were like lined up incorrectly. The first snap, they had 12 men in the huddle. There's all these things that just indicate you haven't been practicing right. And that's, you know, like, oh, you're making fun of Urban Meyer. It's all narrative. He's got Schottenheimer and everything there. They look like they hadn't really like figured out the basics of practicing and lining up. And that feeds everything else, that all the other problems they were having.
And there was also, I'm sorry, I just wanted to make a quick point that, you know, they talked a lot in the, you know, the training camp about giving Gardner Minshew all those reps with the first team and how they were sort of building up his trade value, and everybody's like, ooh, brilliant move. They could get something for him now. But I think it showed in Lawrence's, certainly his early performance in that game, that maybe he could have used a lot more of the first team reps in practice and in training camp, and didn't quite appear to have the total grasp of what he was doing out there, even beyond all the what Mike referred to, the general chaos going on around him. I mean, I think he recuperated as well as he possibly could, and that doesn't take anything away from his obvious great prospects. But it did seem like they did him a little disservice in terms of training camp by giving Minshew all that run.
Yeah.
The idea that Lawrence was going to ever not be the starting quarterback was so ridiculous that we were all laughing at it at the time. But there were real implications on the practice time there.
Yeah, you could see. I mean, he didn't have good timing with the receivers. Balls were going through receivers' hands. Guys were dropping balls. They didn't have the reps that he should have had with the starters, which I think would have cleaned some. I don't think it gets them a win. I don't think it make a big difference this season. But they're not as prepared as they should be coming into week one, and that's not ideal.
So which vibe do you guys get from Urban Meyer? Do you get the Bobby Petrino vibe or the Steve Spurrier vibe?
Rob?
Yeah, he's way too tightly wound to be Steve Spurrier in any capacity. Remember, this is a guy who had to leave Florida not just one step ahead of the posse and the law, but also because his insides rebelled against him, right? I mean, he doesn't give me too much Spurrier vibe. There's definitely some elements of Petrino and with Nick Saban, both guys who took a look around sort of halfway through their NFL sojourn and said, "Not what I signed up for, gents. Check you later." It's like the last thing of Grease, he hops into the convertible with Olivia Newton-John. He's like, "So long, suckers." Yeah, exactly. It's always funny that the song is singing "We Belong Together" while John Travolta and Olivia Newton-John are like, "I'm out of here. See ya." That's a whole nother story. That's a different Twitch podcast, whatever we're doing here.
Great movie musicals with Football Outsiders.
Yeah, no question. Yeah, he definitely, Urban to me is, for all he can say at a press conference a billion times over, he's not going anywhere. And it's possible that USC in and of itself is not the job for him.
Right.
Florida State didn't exactly show out too well in the second game of the season, and there's already buzzards circling around Mike Norvell down there in Tallahassee. I could see that, or certain other gigs that open up. They always do. But yeah, I don't think anybody, as we've been talking and as everybody in Vegas agrees already, it would not be any kind of shock that Meyer ditches that experiment either at season's end or even before.
Yeah. Spurrier would be golfing right now. Spurrier would be like, "Oh, you know what? It's 1:07 Eastern time to hit the links. You guys go do what you want to do." This is more the Petrino vibe.
Yeah, he'd be shirtless too, I think.
Yeah. This is our Ask Me Anything show, so I want to invite people who are watching to ask questions. We've got a few kind of loaded up, but the first thing we should talk about, since we have Robert on the show, is Cincinnati winning in week one. So you watched that game probably a lot more than Mike or I did. I was busy watching Pittsburgh Buffalo.
Yeah.
What were your takeaways? What went really well for Cincinnati? What do you feel good about coming out of that game? What do you think was more about Minnesota having problems than Cincinnati being good? What were your takeaways?
Certainly the overall big picture, and I bring my cynicism into this as a longtime Bengal fan, which is that so much went right. I mean, if you had to draw it up ahead of the time and the weeks coming up to the game, you'd say, what do you want out of that opener? You want, obviously, Joe Burrow to come out healthy and look the way he looked as a rookie, and for the most part he did. You want him to hit a big bomb, LSU style, to Jamar Chase and not have Chase drop any balls. Mission accomplished. You want the offensive line at least to look coherent, which they did for the most part. They did give up 5 sacks, but a lot of that was Mike Zimmer magic and conjuring free runners, not necessarily the guys getting pushed around, which I think was an important step, at least baby step. You want Joe Mixon to run for over 100 yards. You want the defense to show pressure on their own on the quarterback and make critical turnovers. And you want our rookie kicker, future 10-time All-Pro Evan McPherson, to hit a 50-yarder and a game winner for the first time in his career. I mean, they checked every box. And yet, they almost gave the game away in typical Bengals fashion and had to go to the very last snap of overtime to win. So, a very much a mixed bag. And
while you were talking there, the Vikings also jumped off sides 4 times and held 3.
I mean, their penalty, the offensive line in Minnesota was the one that was atrocious. I don't know that that was really a pregame storyline anywhere outside of Cincinnati and Minneapolis, but they were not just overrun by the Bengals front line, which is not exactly Steelers-esque, but they had massive communications issues. They were, just didn't know where to line up. They looked like Jacksonville in some ways. So Minnesota did everything they could to spoon feed the game to the Bengals in a lot of ways. Had, I think, 8 or 9 third and double digits to convert in that game, and still managed to come back. There were some questionable Zack Taylor moments in there. I don't know if this got a lot of run nationally, but Jesse Bates after the game, or maybe on Monday, I guess it was asked about when Zack went for it on fourth and inches, I beg your pardon, up by 14 at their own 30. Questionable call. They went for it, didn't get it. Mixon fell down. One of his few bad plays of the game. Right. And Jesse Bates basically said, "Yeah, we were all pissed off as a defense that we went for it." It should be mentioned that Jesse Bates is in contract renegotiations that have hit a stall, and there's some bad blood between him and the front office. That's a whole other conversation. But I do think he'll be re-signed in the end. And they basically, the defense led by Bates came over to Zack and said, "What the hell's going on?" And he said, "Listen, guys, you're going to have to. This is what we're going to do as a team this year." Zack Taylor knows. He might not get a fourth season if this year goes pear-shaped. They got to win any way they can, and going for it on fourth and inches from their own 30, up by 2 touchdowns, reflected that. And he said, be prepared to bail us out on certain occasions because it's just what we're going to do. The punting game is not going to be a huge part of our game plan this season. So there was a lot of things to certainly question, a lot of Bengals, typical same old Bengals, as people would say, involved. And the big picture, though, is they actually won the game. By hook or by crook, they found a way. That's something they found a way to lose. That's a game they have lost consistently with Taylor, and even before, but certainly with Taylor. Their record in one-score games and in games they've led in halftime or in the fourth quarter is just atrocious. So I don't really care about all the other things that went on, and the fact that a game nearly gave me a stroke and they're taking years off my life. They won it. I think any Bengal fan will tell you that's all that really matters. At the end of the day, we can nitpick our way around a million things, but hey, they're 1-0. They're going to Chicago. I'm going to be in Chicago, by the way, on Sunday for this game.
Nice.
One of my rare forays into enemy stadiums to see the ball game.
Andy Dalton's revenge.
It'll be Andy Dalton's and Bill Lazor, I might add, the revenge game for those two.
Okay.
It'll be our revenge against them, I hope. Let's put it that way.
Bill Lazor could have like a dozen revenge games. He's been in so many teams that
he's been everywhere.
Dolphins revenge, Eagles revenge. Like maybe you should hold on to a job, Bill. Anyway,
it's he should definitely look in the mirror, as they say. But yeah, listen, the Bengals threw away their last 2 openers in games they definitely could have and probably should have won, and a lot of it came down to field goal kicking. So to see us have an actual potential weapon, the kicker is. I know most fan bases wouldn't care about something like that, but in Cincinnati, it's almost never been a thing. So I'm happy for that. Happy they won the game any way they could. A lot of stuff to clean up, of course, but we'll take it.
Thanks to a useful title for subscribing, by the way. Thanks for your subscription. I think the Zack Taylor thing is interesting because if I remember correctly, he was pretty low in aggressiveness index his first couple of years. So if he's sort of come around to the idea of being aggressive on fourth down, I think that is a positive. And it's interesting if it's possible that it is sort of the we have nothing to lose, let's go for it, makes him, if that attitude makes him more aggressive. I definitely do imagine that going for it on fourth down, as much as it probably jazzes up your offensive players, it might piss off your defensive players. It's
you don't want to give up short fields if you have to, right? These guys, these are NFL players. They've seen all the situations. They're mini coaches in and of themselves. There's no doubt that they have opinions. And, not only was it interesting that Bates came out and said that publicly, that he basically led a team revolt, a mini revolt on the sideline, but it's interesting that they would think in that capacity rather than be like, whatever, here we go again, got to bail out the offense. And if you look at the nitty gritty, they actually forced a fourth down on that drive, and we're one play away from making that decision not mean anything. And then they called an all-out blitz, beaten as it seemed inevitably would happen by Cousins to Thielen for a touchdown.
Right.
Game on. They make one more play or one more Minnesota penalty that they were certainly forcing earlier in the game, and they're not even talking about that or having that discussion. But yeah, there's a definite sort of major league vibe around the Bengals. Fuck it, let's win the whole damn thing. Let's just do what we can. Our jobs are on the line. You could say that in Chicago too, and yet they're taking the exact opposite approach. Which
right. You would think that they would feel like, well, if we're gonna lose, let's lose with the rookie.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah,
that's not how they're acting.
Rather than let's lose boring. Much as I love Andy, I mean, come on.
It's the worst. It's the worst coaching decision, but it's the better cover your butt decision to do what the Bears are doing.
Yeah, and I give Taylor plaudits. If he's going to go out, he's going to go out guns a blazing.
Right.
And I'm not saying that it's all situational. And I think even what Aaron referred to as his lack of aggressiveness over the first 2 years, I don't think that's really his style. I think that was more situational / forced his hand because of the offensive line issues. And obviously when Burrow went down last year, that changed a lot. I mean, if Burrow's out there, they're going to go, and they showed it in overtime. I mean, Burrow checked out of one play, saw a different play that he specifically had practiced on Friday or Thursday. One more time, he said, to get the ball to CJ Uzomah because he thought it would work out that he would break open on that play. So that's how far ahead of the game Burrow is. And it worked out, won the game. And, I think Zack Taylor would look at it and say, I got full, trust in this guy. If it's fourth and anywhere makeable, anywhere on the field, other than inside my own 10-yard line, I'll put the ball in Joe's hands and ride or die,
All right, isn't one of our questions from the Ask Me Anything. Why did the Raiders, this is from Dan Murphy, why did the Raiders actually lose 2 rankings in Dave after beating the Ravens? And I'll answer that by saying they didn't.
Okay.
So I don't actually understand the question. So the Raiders were 18th. They were 18th in the projections in the book. They were 21st in the projections on the site before the season. And they're 19th in Dave. So they did go up a little bit from the preseason projections. I'm only mentioning this not to tell Dan that he's wrong, but to open it up to talking about Monday Night Football and what you guys saw from the Raiders game. I think my biggest takeaway was the problems that the Ravens had on their offensive line. Like, is Ronnie Staley fully healthy? And with Alejandro Villanueva, like we underestimate the issues that it takes to move from left to right or from right to left. And Max Crosby was a freaking monster all game. And that would be my main takeaway.
And the Ravens offense right now with these running backs is not the Ravens offense. You can see how tentative they are with their meshes. You can see that there was less confidence in running those options. There were some bobbled exchanges. I think there was a fumbled exchange or two. And there was a lot of the handoff where it's like Lamar's almost like, here, I'm handing off. Like none of the stuff that you're used to in the backfield, which means that they were running a much more watered down version of their offense. I think the line has something to do with that. I think the fact that when I would go to watch them practice, especially in 2019, because last year I obviously couldn't, so much time was being put into the meshes, the exchanges, the pivots, all the other things that go into that backfield. Now, none of these guys have done anything. I guess the one guy was like,
Williams has, but like Latavius Murray hasn't done anything.
Yeah,
right. And Williams was probably doing it with Trace McSorley and the other dude, because they were doing it with the backups most of the time. So you take that element away from it, and that was a big factor. And then I'm going to write about it in walkthrough. It looks like Wink Martindale has a case of Rob Ryan disease, where everything's either a 7-man jailbreak blitz or 3 guys rushing and 8 guys back in coverage, and it always seems to be the wrong answer.
It was a lot more of the latter, I think, and the commentators on the ESPN Megacast pointed this out. I watched the NFL Live crew on ESPN Plus. I mean, it was great that you had the 3 different options for announcers, and I mean no disrespect to Louis Riddick when I say I don't understand anybody who isn't watching either the Mannings or the NFL Live crew. Because I watched the Mannings for a quarter and then I switched to the NFL Live crew. But they brought up that with the injuries, the no Jimmy Smith and no Marcus Peters, that the trust that Martindale has in his corners goes way down. So all of a sudden he's not blitzing and playing man coverage the way Baltimore does. And then Baltimore's not bringing anywhere near as much pressure as they usually do. And so the Raiders are like moving the ball on them, especially later in the game when they discovered that there were actually receivers on the team who were not named Darren Waller.
But there were also some blitzes. And when the blitzes came, you got penalties. You got defensive pass interference penalties. You're leaving Patrick Queen one-on-one, the rookie, I forget his name, one-on-one. So, it's just, and the defense played well for a half.
Is that Averett, the rookie?
I think it was Averett. Yeah. The Averett brothers.
Yeah. It reminds me of the, I think it's the 2018 Ravens, the one that got bounced out of the playoffs on a last second pass by the aforementioned Andy Dalton and put Buffalo into the playoffs that year, and I was saying this to anybody who would listen, that we're talking all about how the hurricane of injuries at running backs is going to kill them, and it doesn't help, obviously, but the Peters injury is really going to affect how they play in so many ways. And you can see it. I mean, they're very prone to not just big plays and not just, getting beat on their blitzes. And it's just a lot of communications issues back there. Or Peters was a guy you didn't have to really explain anything to. He could diagnose almost instantly. He gets very little credit for his defensive football smarts. And that's a guy they could really ill afford to lose. They still have good players on defense, obviously, but their pass rush is created not because of winning one-on-one battles a lot. They're really finding ways to get creative to get to the quarterback, and that's been true for a couple of years now. They even without Matt Judon now, they're even more susceptible to having to play that way. And you play that way without shutdown corners. That's really difficult. And they came into the season thinking, this is what we're going to do. Our strength, it's the age-old discussion about what makes a good defense, pass rush or good coverage, right? And in this case, the Ravens, due to personnel, mainly said, all right, we're going to do it by coverage, and we're going to scheme up front, and we're going to find ways to buy enough time for our guys to get to the quarterback rather than, have our quarterback cover up, our pass rush rather cover up for our secondary. And once you lose Peters right at the beginning, that puts a real wrench in that entire, kind of overall holistic strategy. So they got some issues, and Peters is not replaceable. The running backs at the end of the day, they'll find ways to improve their mesh points and work on that in practice. Greg Roman will tell you it's a very timing-based offense, and that'll improve theoretically. And Lamar will make things happen. When they don't, they won't be blown out. But they're going to give up a lot more points and be vulnerable late in games a lot more than they have in the last couple of years.
I wonder if the mesh point thing is the reason why they ran so few designed runs with Lamar Jackson, right? It was mostly scrambles in this game from Lamar Jackson, and that's not his game.
Right. There didn't seem to be a lot of options put in there, and a lot of more under center. He's under center for a big chunk of the first half, and going back, and it looks like they're running like Sean McVay type stuff, and it's not what they are, not who they are, and I think it limited them, particularly like in the first quarter, first half, when they couldn't sustain their drives.
Some of that might have been just game plan for the Raiders, and also, I think there's a thought that now with the running back injuries, Lamar is going to take a lot more onto his plate as the season progresses, and they probably were thinking to themselves, let's not, go out and get this guy beat up in game one. And we got a short week coming up now, obviously with Monday Night Football. Let's maybe have, and of course it doesn't necessarily work out that way, best laid plans, but I do think that you're going to see that throughout the year. They're going to probably for the first month at least kind of hold back on letting Lamar loose on design runs as much as they possibly can.
The Lamar Jackson runs, he's not out there running power, right? It's not dependent on Lamar Jackson as much as Lamar Jackson's getting running yards is dependent on the the fooling them with the running back, and the running back's getting yards is dependent on fooling them with Lamar Jackson. So if things aren't working well between the two, neither of them is getting the yardage.
That's about it. Right. And if they're not comfortable with the option where the ball might be getting pulled away, might not get pulled away, et cetera, and the running back hasn't practiced this enough, then you get wary of a fumbled exchange.
Yeah. And the Raiders were definitely cheating on that too. They saw that coming, and they were ready for that kind of play.
I thought the Raiders were sort of the team that I expected. Like in the long run, the Raiders were a above average offense and below. I mean, the Ravens did score 29 points. Like the Raiders were a kind of slightly above average offense, slightly below average defense, which is sort of what I expected. Their offensive line had some problems. Leatherwood didn't look good. I think I'm blown away by how little they use Henry Ruggs.
Yeah.
I realize he had like the one big catch, but otherwise, for a dude who's taken 11th overall, my God, they do not use him.
He's like the only guy left that's like a high draft pick. That's not true because Abram is out there and Jacobs, but it's another one of those. Did you have a plan for this guy? Like Farrell, the edge rusher that they had to.
It was a healthy scratch.
What was the plan for this guy going in? But one thing about the Raiders is, last year we saw him beat the Chiefs early. And we saw him beat the Saints early. And there were games where the opponent made a lot of mistakes and everything, and they didn't. So we've seen this from the Raiders before. Like you said, it's the team you expect. Let's see how it goes in a couple of weeks when we get a little more, when they have to deal with some injuries, when they get figured out a little bit. Let's see where they're at in the scheme of things.
Yeah, I don't trust them at all. And not to bring it all back to the Bengals, but I definitely get strong John Ross vibes off of Ruggs so far. And you have to wonder if there's a lot of behind the scenes things going on there too, with Ross, who was constant friction with the coaches and injury, things with him. I don't know that Ruggs has been massively injured particularly, but I do get the feeling that there's some chafing going on behind the scenes. And the Raiders to me they're interesting mainly because of their Vegas surroundings, really more so than they are as a team. I think they'll be exactly, I'd say
I said in the preseason they were the most boring team in the NFL.
Yeah,
take away the trappings of Al Davis's memory and the fact that they play in Las Vegas.
Yeah, it's
the most boring team in the NFL. Their quarterback is quietly, consistently, slightly above average. There's no real stars on offense. Even Jacobs is not like a fantasy stud or anything like that. There's no real stars on defense. I mean, Matt Crosby is good, but I don't think anybody would despite the fact that he had a really great game, I don't think anybody would call him one of the top pass rushers in the league. Even the Carl Nassib story, which a few years ago would have been a much bigger deal than it is now kind of like we all just accept it. So it's not really changing the boringness. It's a good thing. It's a good thing, right? That doesn't make them more exciting.
But
it doesn't. It doesn't make them more exciting. They're really boring. They're just a really boring team.
Well, boring can be good.
Yeah, well, and then they're boring in the same way that when you go to like a Siegfried and Roy show, it's like, yeah, you're in Vegas, it's great, and then you're like, oh yeah, but I'm still seeing Siegfried and Roy, and 30 minutes is enough. I mean, it's just like, they don't offer you anything as a viewer outside of the pop and the circumstances and the pageantry that they offered there around the game with the DJ and the all kinds of fun stuff on the edges, and really you get the feeling almost that the fact that they don't really have any stars and are kind of boring in their players and their personnel is by design, because God forbid anybody outshine John Gruden, right? I mean, he's the TV personality that everybody wants to revolve around. So, I think that's how they draft, and that's how they build their team. A lot of blandness. And
I'm actually going. I'm going to Las Vegas in November.
That's
nice.
I haven't been on vacation in 2.5 years. We're taking a mini vacation, and I happen to be going the weekend that Kansas City plays the Raiders in the Sunday night game.
That'd be fun.
And my plan is to go to Allegiant Stadium and find out what all the hoo-ha is about.
Yeah.
It's good because for you, it's like, you're getting out of Massachusetts when it's going to be like 10 degrees and the sun's going to be setting at like whatever, 4:45 or whatever. Yes. But the way Rob was describing it, it's like, hey, the guys will be like, hey, you want to go to Vegas? Like, I'm going to sit in a bar and gamble. I can sit in bars and gamble in Jersey. What's the appeal now?
You can't sit in bars and gamble in Massachusetts. Sports gambling is still not legal in Massachusetts.
At an Indian casino instead, right? They do it off.
Brian Knowles apparently does not believe that I actually planned my trip around the Chiefs Raiders game. I point out I'm missing Cleveland coming to Foxborough.
Oh,
to go see Kansas City versus the Raiders.
Yeah.
So it is that it just happened to be that weekend, because I was like, oh, I'm upset that I'm missing the Browns coming here, but that weekend worked better for us for other personal reasons. And then it turned out that Kansas City is playing the Raiders in an island game where I don't even have to worry about that. I can't pay attention to other games.
You're just
the question is, you have to,
the Browns.
yeah, how much you can have to mortgage your house to afford.
Oh, I'm going on a press pass.
Because,
I'm not buying tickets.
Okay. Well, I didn't know if you were, bringing along the better half there.
Oh, no. She'll be playing slots or something.
You'll be losing all your money in the casino while you're on the press pass. I understand.
Right.
Got it.
Sir Crayon asks, have we discussed our NFL picks methodology, especially early in the year? The answer is that my picks early in the year, which, by the way, were horrendous in week one, absolutely horrendous, 3-10, and I am embarrassed, are based on the preseason projections for week one. They're based on Dave ratings early in the season. So we still incorporate the projection a lot into the picks, rather than leaping to conclusions and really basing things heavily on week one DVOA. And I think that that's the way to go. I was surprised when ESPN, Seth Walder tweeted out their FPI, and they had the Packers drop to 17th in the league in FPI.
Yeah.
Despite the fact that they got keelhauled by the Saints, does anybody right now believe that the Packers are a below average team?
Not me, Rob.
No. I mean, it seems like a clickbaity thing to do, to be quite frank.
I mean, it's not. I know the people who design it, and it's not. They're trying to be as accurate as possible.
Right.
It just felt to me like it really weighted week one. And of course, this gets to another question we have from Stacy Langan for the Ask Me Anything, which is, why do all the teams in the NFC North suck? And the answer, I think, is I don't think the Packers do suck.
Right.
No.
I'll field this one. The Packers don't actually suck, although I'm a little bit worried about how listless they look. The Bears suck because they're being purposefully mismanaged by their general manager and head coach, who are trying to hide their incompetence at this point. The Vikings don't understand what return on investment and cost benefit analysis works. So their plan for everything is to spend more money on their veterans. And now they have built a team that's actively bad, but very expensive, but they don't realize it because all the guys have track records of being pretty good. And the Lions suck because they are rebuilding right now and they don't have any players. There it is.
I mean, I still, I think, am higher on the Vikings than you are. Although I was surprised. I thought that our Vikings projection was going to be higher than the market, and it wasn't. The market was about where we were on the Vikings, which is that they were a slightly above average, on the verge of being playoff contenders team. And that's how the Vegas line had them in the preseason. Yeah. It wasn't much different from our projection at all. I still feel like there's a lot of talent in Minnesota. And like I said a lot in the preseason, like there were a lot of things for them last year that went really bad in ways that happened to regress towards the mean. Like their special teams are not going to be that bad. Their defense is not going to be that injured. That being said, if you said to me which teams had things subjectively go bad for them in the preseason where they look worse for reasons that aren't in the stats, the number one team would be Baltimore and the number two team would be Minnesota.
Yep.
Right.
And you just saw a game. We saw a game, Rob, where a bunch of things went badly for them that don't necessarily show up in the statistics, and they lose. Where there are miscommunications, where the crowd noise in Cincinnati is just too much for Kirk Cousins and Garrett Bradbury, who've been playing together for 3 years, to manage. Where they are always stuck in 3rd and 15 for some reason. Where they don't have anybody to turn to except Cook, Thielen, and Jefferson, where you go to the next guy down on their list and it's not there. So all these little marginal things that they're not really good at, I think add up a little more each year and add up to put them in a position where they wind up losing to teams like the Bengals that you expect them to beat.
I'll just point out, by the way, the average to go for Minnesota on 3rd and 4th downs, this is not punts, but like where they actually went for it, was 11.2.
Right.
There was no other team above 10 this week.
Yes. Tune in tomorrow's walkthrough. I talk about this, where Kirk Cousins pretty much set a record for how many times he could throw before the sticks on 3rd and long.
3rd and 24, 3rd and 20, 3rd and 24, 3rd and 20, 3rd and 26.
Yes. Holding followed by sack.
3rd and 24s, by the way. If they don't convert that first 3rd and 24, that should have been a blowout at that stage. The Eli Apple killer
that was
drive.
actually, believe it or not, the second 3rd and 24 that they they actually did convert one of the 3rd 24s with a pass to KJ Osborne. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, KJ. He broke right at free from Eli. And then Eli was so downbeat about the whole thing, he proceeded to have a defensive holding and then get thrown down on the touchdown pass by Thielen.
Yeah.
Going back to the overall NFC North, if I could just for a second. First of all, I think, we're forgetting the fact that in the Packers case, they showed up to Jacksonville and probably assumed they were playing the Jaguars. And then all of a sudden, wait a minute, we got to play the Saints and Sean Payton? Oh, my God. Completely threw him off. I take the Aaron Rodgers approach here, and he was just like, whatever. We had a crappy game. It was super hot. We were down early and just kind of threw it into the fire and burned the game tape and said, the heck with it. Let's move on. I mean, there are issues there, and certainly the fact that they lost an all-pro center and played without their all-pro left tackle, and they moved their replacement outstanding offensive lineman out to tackle, and it's kind of jerry-rigged right now, and they were playing formidable front four. That obviously had a lot to do with it. And, they get to play all those crappy teams that we just mentioned. They get to play Chicago twice and Detroit twice and the Vikings. So in Minnesota's case, I do fear that there's, on top of what you were talking about, Aaron, and there's a bit of, I don't know if Mike Zimmer fatigue is exactly the right way to put it, but there's a lot of talk in Minnesota that, his message is being tuned out now. And because of the fact that, they favored the vets buy in, but they keep getting hurt and they're not doing it the way they could. And he's just not reaching the guys who, the next generation, if you will, of especially defensive players. They still obviously are formidable with their skill guys.
Right.
And, I thought it was pretty apparent that, the Bengals had a lot of mismatches that they could take advantage of. And there was not a lot of, adjustments being made by Zimmer in real time. They kind of, let's get to that. We got to give Rashawn Breeland some help, et cetera.
Yeah.
But driver too late. And I think, they're also breaking in a new offensive coordinator there, Gary Kubiak's son, Clint, who we don't know that much about. I mean, you assume just because of his last name, he knows what he's doing. But as we've seen in various NFL provinces, that's a dangerous assumption to make. So who was with them? Funnily, I thought Detroit actually showed a little bit of the most promise of that team, just because not just the comeback, which I don't put a huge amount of stock into, but I thought Penei Sewell looked much more natural on his left side. Shocker. I thought that they had a bit of an identity, what they want to do, and Jared Goff showed that maybe just maybe he could pull off what they're looking to do. He's not going to be a great player. No, but I mean, I'm not saying they're going to be good. I'm saying they're not going to be a train wreck.
Yeah, I can't tell. Early in that game, I was like, oh boy, do I feel stupid about my Detroit over 4.5. And then by the end of the game, I was like, all right, I don't feel so stupid about Detroit over 4.5.
7 wins is definitely in their grasp. I mean, there's a long way to go. A lot of things to assume from that, but just from the fact that where they were in terms of mockery before the season, most of it self-induced by Dan Campbell, of course. And boy, it's fun to make fun of him. But there's something there. There's a way forward there for them to get into the out of the trash and into the mediocre range of the NFL.
Yeah, they can run the ball between the tackles very, very well. They looked very solid doing that. But Jared Goff plus no wide receivers is bad. Anything he had to throw towards the sidelines that wasn't the Hawkinson balls, had tails on them, things like that. Guys were not open for him. But it's going to be a long year. I still think they can bang 5 wins. I can find 5 wins on that schedule because they are strong on both offensive and defensive line. They will run the ball. If games don't snowball on them, then they'll be in good shape. But I think I know there are Cardinals questions coming because, the Packers game we boils down to was a snowball game. You fall behind and you throw an interception that's snowballed. Until the end, the 49ers-Lions game was kind of a snowball, and then they covered. They covered for me. But that Titans-Cardinals game, the reason why it is so lopsided is because it's a snowball game. You take a lead, this team that wants to be super balanced, wants to run the ball, falls behind, and then they're put in a position where, they can't protect the quarterback, and you're given a short field, et cetera, and it creates this big rout.
Yes, Eric Zembeck says, are the Cardinals that good or the Titans that bad? Maybe a bit of both. And one of the stats I've seen around is that the Titans ran almost no play action in that game, which is such a huge change. But I would think that's driven by the score. That once you take away the fear of the run, you're not running play action passes when you're down by like 3 touchdowns in the second half.
It was, but they also started handing off to Henry in the third quarter down by 3 scores. Now, I get the let's get him some carry, let's get him going in general thing. But if you can hand off, you can run play action. Yeah, it was a total of 3 play action passes. I pulled it off of SIS earlier. 2 of them were sacks.
Yeah, and Chandler Jones just demolished their game plans, I feel like, and and then they went to, I saw another stat where they played almost no tight ends in the game and just went 3 wide pretty much the entire the second half. Some of that is game script, obviously, but I think there's sort of, we're assuming they're going to play just like Arthur Smith played. And, that's probably not the case. They'll probably do some things differently, at least a handful of things. Not that they won't get Henry the ball, but they'll do some other stuff.
They might want to fake a handoff once in a while. They may want to try that.
Right.
I was like,
exactly. In the case of confirming your priors, I mean, I said in the preseason, one of the reasons that the Titans were down in our projections was new offensive coordinator. And you don't know if new offensive coordinator will do things the way old offensive coordinator did. Right. And after week 1, that's one of everybody's big worries is, okay, how much does the change in offensive coordinator mean here?
Yeah, and there was a lot of first down handoff to Henry. I didn't check the boxes. I didn't look at it like if it was 8-man, but handoff to Henry first down. Not a lot of play action there. Like you said, part of it was scheme dependent in the second half, that where you're down by 3 touchdowns and you're taking guys out. This was not a game plan that I looked at and said, "Oh my God, this guy has really figured out the best use of his personnel."
Yeah, I think we've talked about it in previous Football Outsiders almanacs, at least anyway. But there's obviously a difference between new offensive coordinator because the old guy got fired and you want to upgrade from what he was doing versus losing your offensive coordinator because he gets a head coaching gig and he was so good and you're trying to live up to what he did without, blindly following his footsteps. And, that certainly takes a while to work out in a lot of cases. We obviously don't know yet what that's going to work out here. When you were talking about all the 2 things I just want to quickly mention. First of all, with the Chandler Jones game that he had, I definitely like the Tyler Lewan tweet of shame. And I think that should be a weekly thing. Like the guy who had the worst performance all week should be forced to tweet out, God, thank you, opponent, for making me look like a complete JV player and ring the shame bell again, like Game of Thrones, and just have that part of the NFL landscape. I really enjoyed that. But mentioning Arthur Smith and Mike, you were talking about how the snowball games happen. That Atlanta game I saw some of, and that was a game that was really strange in that's the Falcons are not a team that's looking to run the ball. I know that Arthur Smith is coming in there and trying to bring his precepts from the Titans, but obviously given their scheme, they want to throw, and they look great for 2 drives. And you could just see they had to settle for 3 in the red zone. Mm-hmm. Tennessee had been a good red zone team, and that hasn't moved over yet to Atlanta. And you could just see the life go out of them. And of course, with that offensive line, they were just they just gave up. They're like, we're not going to get Matt Ryan killed in week 1 in a game that we have no chance of coming back. And boy, for disappointing debuts, Arthur Smith is the son of Fred Smith, the head of FedEx, and he had to be like back to the early days of, I guess they did their first days right there in their own living room and trying to send out these packages, all going to the wrong addresses, and people returning mail. This guy doesn't live here anymore. I mean, it was that much of a debacle in Atlanta, and they've already given up locally here. I live in Atlanta, and people are already just punting on the season completely. It's like, we have no offensive line. We're playing the Bucs this week. We're going to get murdered, and it's just like, when does the Hawk season start? Is UGA going to win it all, that kind of thing? But the Falcons are a non-entity already in Atlanta.
Matt Noskow actually says not to be one of those WIP callers, but is there real hype around the Eagles? How much was the Eagles are better than you think, and how much was the Falcons are worse than we thought?
I had a guy, I was in a bar, and because I'm watching, I'm not drinking EdjSports, I'm watching multiple games. And I heard a guy say, you know what, this team has a February feel to it. These Eagles have a February feel to it. So that WIP caller, Matt Noskow, yeah, there's already that going on here in Philly. Now, I don't know how many people are like that, but what there is, I mean, what I would say is there's genuine enthusiasm now. Nick Sirianni has flipped the script. He's no longer the guy who was nervous in his first press conference, and I'm just a Howie Roseman puppet. That stuff has gone away. Jalen Hurts isn't just a placeholder while we wait for Deshaun Watson to come or wait to get all the first-round picks for Carson Wentz. And it is more about this team right now, what they're capable of this year, what they're developing. And that's coming off a win. I don't know how many people are seriously think this is a February football team, but they're a football team that's not going to be a nightmare to watch every week like the Falcons generally are and like the Eagles were last year.
Yeah,
I mean, I think
February dark and cloudy with a chance of sleet. That's to me is a February feel, and not necessarily good things, but okay, whatever gets that guy through the day.
It was $2 Miller Lights.
I mean, I'm playing San Francisco this week. I mean, if we go with the idea that we still learn more from preseason projections than we do from week one, I mean, San Francisco is a 3.5-point favorite, and the Football Outsiders picks really like San Francisco with only 3.5 points.
Yep, still 3.5 points. I kind of like San Francisco there too. And one thing I'm looking for is how YAC-tastic this game is going to be, because we know the 49ers love yards after catch. They led the league in yards after catch in week one. Part of it was Debo running 6 million yards wide free, but a lot of plays too. And the Eagles are now YAC-tastic too, because a lot of what they're doing right now, using the option threat, using the great offensive line to set up the screen games on the outside. And the one place where you could possibly hit the 49ers defense is at their secondary, especially with Verretting.
Verrett is hurt again and out for the year again.
Pour a little out for Jason Verrett. But don't challenge Nick Bosa. Those guys get the ball on the perimeter to Rieger, get it to Devontae Smith, get to the tight ends, and see if you can create some YAC and make it close. I'm still leaning 49ers, but I think it could be very close.
Do we think there is a Greenbrier, West Virginia effect in that's where the 49ers stayed during the week and that they're not going back and forth, and maybe there's two ways to look at it. One, it's a smart thing, save the travel miles and the jet lag, and you're in the East Coast, and that's good. Or I don't know how many people know about Greenbrier, but it's one of the sort of swankiest. Yeah, I mean, it's unbelievably swanky. It usually hosts, visiting dignitaries and heads of state, and I can see the likes of, the Bosas and the Armsteads just kind of just chilling out and being like, "This is the life, baby," and we got to go play a game. Do we have to? Okay, let's go. Fine, whatever. And maybe they start sluggishly for a quarter and a half. I do like the 49ers, generally speaking, of course, but while losing Verrett and Mostert, we should mention too, is now officially out for the season, not just half the season. That's not quite the level of losses they suffered in week one last year, but I mean, this is the 49ers, and they're getting droves of guys hurt every year. And to me, long term, not this week, but it's already starting. And you just hope that they can make it in somewhat healthy fashion, for more than one out of every 4 years during the Shanahan administration.
The secondary is a real problem. They don't have anybody who can keep up with Devontae Smith.
Right.
They do not.
They're going to have a rookie out there. But now I have this image of Kyle Shanahan and Jimmy Garoppolo in those hot springs.
Oh, baby.
Hot tubs of the Greenbrier, just big pimping. And
they got
I can't unsay
$1,000 glasses of cognac in their hand. They're just like, golfing 36 holes. It's like, baby, we're going to become the West Virginia 49ers. Forget the San Francisco business. It's the place to be. So just throwing it out there as a possibility. If it's 10-0 Eagles after 11 minutes on Sunday, maybe there's a
Useful title says it's time to dust off Trey Sermon for the 49ers. And I think that's true. I think the reason Sermon was inactive is because he doesn't play special teams, but he's the replacement for Mostert, not Elijah Mitchell.
Mitchell played well though. Don't, and of course they'll go with hot hand, they'll go with committee, but Mitchell looked good. It wasn't just nonsense because, the game was out of hand.
No, that was a Shanahan. I could make anybody in the backfield look good kind of flex, right? I mean, him and his dad have been doing that forever. And no doubt Sermon's going to have an impact this season at some point. If it's not this Sunday, he'll be out there and he'll be good. No question.
Brian Knowles points out our backcast projections liked Mitchell more than they liked Sermon.
That's right.
That's true.
That's right.
Yeah.
So,
wait and see.
Yeah, wait and see. Here's a question from Seth Vanderpool. He asked over Instagram, do we think that the Lamar Jackson, Patrick Mahomes play style as quarterbacks will become more popular in the future? I'm trying to think of, first of all, what makes those two similar. I guess it's throwing off platform, right? Like throwing sidearm and like while falling down. And I mean, because Mahomes doesn't do the planned runs. He doesn't do the design runs the way Lamar Jackson does, but they both will like vary their arm angles and throw while scrambling a lot. And I mean, yes, I think that that's more popular in the future. I think that the Mac Jones pocket passer is, there's going to be less guys like that, and there's going to be more guys who run around. I mean, Herbert can run around, and Lawrence can run around, and Fields can run around, and most of the young quarterbacks can run around.
And Fields is lots of platforms on his arm. If you go back and look at him in the preseason, he's throwing 3/4 arm. When he's on the move, he can deliver the ball accurately from a lot of different angles, and that's part of it. But yeah, they're very different quarterbacks. So you got to point out Mahomes is in a different plane as a passer, 2 planes up from Lamar Jackson and a plane up from just about everybody else. So it's a very different things. But yeah, the idea that you're going to be embracing a little bit more mobility, et cetera, that's been a continuum for the last 30 years in the NFL, and I think it's going to continue.
Yeah, Mahomes is sui generis. I mean, so much of what he does is just because of his baseball background more than anything else, right? So, I mean, I don't even know if you can make that comparison, but yeah, the mobility is obvious. Although if you look at, it's kind of dependent on who's coming out through the college ranks, I guess, and the high school studs. And right now at this moment, where are you looking? Spencer Rattler, he can move around, right? I mean, but Sam Howell and Carson Strong, these are more prototypical guys. Matt Corral kind of mixes it up. Kind of depends on, who emerges from the college and even now the high school ranks because of NIL. So many high school stallions, shall we say, are just blowing off even their senior year of high school and are going to college football earlier than expected. We saw that with Quinn Ewers going to Ohio State. So, a lot of that question that I'm assuming he's talking about in terms of the more athletic, not necessarily the platform and the way they throw, but the athletic style of quarterback. I think that's an advantage that will be certainly the NFL is looking to have. Question is, how many of the quarterbacks that are NFL quality will come out of college and play to that level. Fields certainly is a guy who's going to be that caliber of player. I don't think there's any doubt about it. And we'll be asking questions about, who's the next Justin Fields coming out of college this time next year, I think.
Jake Murray asks on Twitter, which NFL team is the Suicide Squad? Expected to die the moment they set foot on the field, but somehow they survive and even succeed.
I'm calling this one. Everyone wants to say the Texans because we were debating this. I'm going with the Arizona Cardinals, in part because they're cobbled together out of random parts. Like there's no logical reason why you have J.J. Watt and A.J. Green and all these linebackers who are safeties, who are defensive backs, who are pass rushers on the team. But the key to it is Chandler Jones. Because instead of giving Chandler Jones more money, they stuck a chip in the back of his head where if he doesn't get 5 sacks a game, they'll explode it. Okay, so that's my reasoning there. They were supposed to go out there and stink. Instead, they're playing lights out because of survival, but not just survival, because the Suicide Squad is also about personal redemption and pride. And that's what the Arizona Cardinals are all about.
Can I just say, when I saw this question, I was like, I'm not super familiar with the details of the Suicide Squad, but it seemed to me that you could sub in the Dirty Dozen very well for that particular question. Make that happen. And of course, they already have Jim Brown, so you're one step ahead of all the opponents when you do that. I like the Cardinals thought. The Texans were the obvious thought, and some people were even throwing out my Bengals as a potential. I think when you have Joe Burrow on your team, that sort of eliminates you from being a team that automatically is just roll over and die. But when you send them out behind, the caliber of line that certainly they sent out last year, that's suicidal. So let's throw him out there. And
no, the Texans are definitely cobbled together. I mean, who decided we were going to put Mark Ingram and Philip Lindsay and Rex Burkhead all together in the same backfield? And then, Tyrod Taylor is the quarterback, but they might have to go to Davis Mills later in the season. And I mean, that is definitely a cobbled together roster.
That's more of a major league thing. I can't see Jack Easterby as the supervillain. He can't be Amanda Waller.
I guess the Texans are more like major league.
Yeah.
Like here are the guys who've been rejected by other teams. It's Vernon Hargreaves. Yay.
Yeah, right. Let's give him a 5th chance.
What league were you in? The California Penal? I can't believe that he made it.
All right.
Oh man, we got to get you updated, Rob, on the Suicide Squad. We got to get you in with the superhero movies.
Apparently, weren't there two? I mean, I don't even know which one
There
to
was
choose
Suicide Squad, and then there's the Suicide Squad.
I see. Oh, in the article, right?
You've got on one hand, you've got your Suicide Squad, and then you've got your the Suicide Squad. Very different.
Yeah, and the Suicide Squad is like the Ohio State University. It's much better than Suicide Squad, which is just...
Yeah, that could be anything. Yeah, that
could
be a bunch of guys.
University of Ohio and Oxford.
Home. Yeah, that's yeah. I'm not completely DC and Marvel ignorant. I just don't particularly know that one slice of the franchises that they're foisting upon us these days. But I will. I'll study up on the Suicide Squad. No question.
Absolutely,
from the like Football Outsiders.
It's just like the Dirty Dozen, except Margot Robbie instead of Trini Lopez, which I think is a real upgrade. So,
that's a massive upgrade, no question.
One more question here. Madison Cecil, we've seen and talked about young quarterbacks this season. After week 1, who do you think is the most successful or playoff bound? My money's on Justin Herbert. I mean, the first question is, if you're talking young quarterbacks, who goes into the discussion? Are we talking year 1 guys?
Right.
Are we talking year 1 or 2 guys? Are we talking years 1 through 3? I mean, as far as the rookies go, I thought Mac Jones looked the best in his first start.
Right.
But it's almost to be expected. He was considered he was the most pro ready and has the least amount of like arm talent. So like he was starting from a higher place and going to a lower place.
Right. With a better offensive line.
So him having the best first start is not a shock to me.
No, it's not. And he looked fine, but again, it's like, oh, look, the offensive line's protecting him, the defense is keeping it close. He gets to have a solid game. Wilson and Lawrence were in these nightmare scenarios in both of their games. Lawrence had an easy opponent, at least, but was almost sabotaged by his coaches. And the Jets roster is stunning. It is a shrine game roster. It really is a shrine game roster. So it's hard to get. And Wilson started looking good at the end, but he was like a squirrel in the freeway for most of that game.
I feel pretty good about the Patriots' chances against the Jets this week, I will say.
I think that's pretty solid. I think you have 12 and a half.
Such a superior defense.
Wait, why am I only seeing 6 points here? Hold on a second.
The line is 5.5 last time I saw.
Yeah, it's very low. It's very low.
Now, take it.
I mean, the Jets are at home, but yeah, I like that one.
Yeah. The question for me is only whether or not we'll get the mic'd up Zach Wilson saying, I'm seeing ghosts out there, Sam Darnold when he played against Belichick at similar age. Listen, young quarterbacks in that boat, obviously 2 of them only saw spot duty, Fields and Lance, so it's hard to even throw them into the mix. If you want to throw the second-year guys in there, Joe Burrow I've talked about, he played very well, all things considered, first action back.
Yep.
They took a load off him. They ran the ball a lot, even in passing situations to not expose him as much as they could. But he's still Joe Burrow. The anticipation, the timing, seeing the field, he knows what he's doing. There's no doubt. And Herbert was, in some ways, even better. I mean, he got a really clean pocket. I'll say that. I mean,
yes.
Considering he was playing against Washington in particular.
Yeah. Yep. I think that was the big takeaway from that game is the cobbled, thrown together rebuild in the Chargers line certainly passed and aced their initial test against them. You can make the argument that maybe the Washington football team defense is slightly overrated coming into the season. Everybody thought they'd be the 85 Bears. Not quite that good, but certainly they have a lot of players up front, and the Chargers took care of them very well. And Herbert, third down especially, made some really bullet throws. He was very impressive. So he'd still put Burrow and Herbert in a much different league, I think, than any of the rookies and even Tua. Tua didn't show me a ton. I didn't see that game, but
I will say statistically, Herbert was so good on third down that it does scream regression. Like he was not good as good on first and second down, although some of that was the receivers, and he was phenomenal on third down, and it's not likely to continue.
It was almost like a challenge. Like, let's see what I can do here to make it more difficult because the game's too easy for me. Let's make everything third down and then throw into the teeth of this defense and show him what I can really do. Because he was, as you said, on third down, he was exceptional. What'd you guys feel from Tua? I didn't see a ton of the Patriots Dolphins game. Did you feel like Tua took any step forward?
He was the opposite. He really struggled on third down.
Yeah.
2 of their third down conversions were actually Jacoby Brissett sneaks. And he definitely is like, if it's quick stuff, he's really good.
Yeah.
If he's required to sit in the pocket and find his guy downfield, I mean, they had open guys. The Patriots secondary is definitely missing Gilmore he wasn't hitting.
Right. Yeah, they didn't have a plan on third and long. He didn't look good. Offensive line looked like it started to struggle and it had to actually pass protect and all. So, and that's troubling because your second year you got weapons. You should be more capable in that situation.
Yeah, from the highlights I saw Jalen Waddle, he certainly looked like he was the player.
Yes,
that was.
He was open a lot against Jalen Mills, right? I mean, Jalen Mills is not an outside corner, is not what he does best, but he's been forced into that by the Gilmore injury.
You'll get the full experience because he made a play in the end zone. He had a pass defense.
Fantastic play in the end zone.
Yeah, that's it. You'll be like, oh my God, he's getting beat, and then he's going to make a play in the end zone. Like, okay, randomly, he rises to the occasion against the Falcons in the playoffs a couple of years ago, most famously. But that's kind of part of the Green Goblin experience with Jalen Mills.
Mm-hmm. All right, I want to thank. Sorry, what were you going to say?
I just say Mike can't resist those comic book references.
It's Mills' fault for coloring his hair green. I didn't know if he'd switch to blue once he was with the Patriots. Right. Become the Blue Goblin.
Right, Blue Beetle.
All right, I'm gonna wrap it up here. Thank you so much to people who watched on twitch.tv/FB Outsiders. Thanks to Robert Weintraub for joining us this week. Thanks always to Mike Tanier. We will be back with another show tomorrow. I will not be the Jewish holiday, but Mike will be here along with Cale Clinton and JP Acosta. So the young blood showing out tomorrow to preview week 2 in the NFL. So join us tomorrow, 1:00 Eastern on twitch.tv/FB Outsiders. And thank you everybody for watching today.